Welcome everyone to House of Reverend and to the Cyprian School of Theology and St. Matthew's Bible Study. Here we are, starting a brand new course. And for those who are in the diaconate program, you've known this was coming, a course on independent Catholicism, which has been on the books for 2 years, and we're finally doing it. And I want to just say a little bit that's probably on a more personal level before we get into the content of this. I have had occasion to look at the programs that some of the other independent Catholic groups are offering their students on this topic. And for the most part, they cover what happened in Europe, the old Catholicism, and they cover the U.S., but distinctly lacking in all of those that I reviewed was anything international. So independent Catholicism is an international movement, and it's gone on for well over 100 years in different parts of the world, and especially given our ethnic community, where we have East Indians, Filipinos, Native Americans, African Americans, Belgian, especially,
and Netherlands.
It's very important to have some concept of where do we fit into independent Catholicism and how did all groups fit in, or did they? Their story is not the same as ours. Their issues were not the same as ours. So what I have tried to do is to begin to put together a curriculum that's going to at least briefly touch on all of these different national and ethnic groups. And you see that stack of books on the table there? Mm-hmm. That's part of what I read over the summer. Most of them are in my Kindle. These are the ones that you could not get in a Kindle. You had to buy the hard copy. So there is a lot to this. I'm also in the process of getting interviews with key people in the independent Catholic movement who have some sort of international aspect to their ministries, as well as just common U.S. People, so that we hopefully will have some of those interviews to watch, not during class time, but we'll make those available to you. I just finished the first one this past week of Bishop Pablo, who is the presiding bishop of ECC, and he has long had ministries going on in Central America. Right. Which he continues to do, even while he is presiding bishop of ECC. And there are going to be some others that I think you will find very interesting. So that is the plan for this. It will end up in a book, ultimately, because as far as I could find, no one has actually written a book on independent Catholicism with international perspectives. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do that coming out of this program. Now, I should say a couple of things even more personal. Here I am, 22 years in the independent Catholic movement. And I am now on my 6th jurisdiction. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Think about the instability of this movement. Mm-hmm. Now, some of these were just unfortunate, and many of them I hate to tell you, were ego-driven, not mine. I just was a little peon in the system at that point. One of the bishops died, and all of her clergy just scattered to the four winds. I don't know what happened to all the people. Each one of these is a story in its own right. One bishop kicked out my presbyter mentor, who then decided she would get herself made a bishop, and I followed her. I can look back and say stupidly, but she was the moment of stability at that point. So then, after working my heart out for her, by the way, designing and developing an entire IC seminary curriculum for her, does history repeat itself? She asked me to do something that I thought was beyond her scope as a bishop. To ask me was very serious, was very anxiety provoking. It had nothing to do with theology. It had nothing to do with my behavior. But she kicked me out. And at that point, I had a little cluster of people coming here to St. Julia's for Mass every week. And so I thought, what am I going to do? Well, I was on the internet and I had crossed paths with a bishop named John Plummer, who is in Tennessee. Now, John, when he earned his doctorate in theology, he did probably the first academic study of independent Catholicism that was ever done. He went all around the U.S. and interviewed, must have been hundreds of these little groups, what they call micro jurisdictions. You know, a micro district might be made up of 3 people. That's the state of affairs. And so John agreed to be my interim bishop because I felt I was going to continue with House of Junia. I had a following here, people in the neighborhood, and a bunch of college students. And so John became my interim bishop while I explored the possibility of a permanent jurisdiction. Well, meanwhile, while I had been under the bishop that kicked me out, one Sunday I stumbled into a place called St. Matthew's. At that point, I was a deacon in her jurisdiction, and I was very pleasantly surprised by St. Matthew's. I liked it really well. Well, she discouraged me to get me out of there. And in my naivete at that time, I didn't understand how proprietary independent Catholic bishops can be with their small little numbers. So she discouraged me and I didn't go back. But after she kicked me out, I looked up St. Matthew's again. And I contacted Peter Hickman, and he picked me up off the curb. I asked him if he wanted a conversation with my previous bishop to check me out, and he said no. And I went through a pretty rigorous application process, which after several months, I got incarbonated in. That was 2011. So that gives you just a little idea of the mercurial, unstable situation in this movement that's driven by personalities. Many of the people in the movement have very poor formation. the amount of agreement and cooperation in this movement is minimal. You still have bishops that are going to be territorial, and they can get together and hail fellow well met, but they'll never come to any agreements with one another to cooperate and work. So this is the status of American independent Catholicism. And I think we want to take a look at the whole movement as objectively as we can and see where we fit in and what are the lessons we can learn from these various movements in different countries and locations, and seek to understand what are the lessons that we need to take into account for us to stabilize ourselves and to survive beyond our founder, should I say, because many of these movements, it's rare that they last more than 20 years. They don't last beyond their founder. And many of them are much shorter. Mm-hmm. And yet, there are three strands that became independent Catholic groups that have endured stably for over 100 years. Now, what's the difference between them and us? We'll take a look at those things. But today, I want to drop back first to some material that precedes any of this. And what I've done in your handout, there was a bishop in ECC who Yeti and I got to know a little bit because when we went to Seattle, Washington years back to attend Bishop, what is her name? Wraith? No, her name.
Bishop Ketta?
Ketta. Bishop Ketta's ordination as a priest at that point. We stayed in the same hotel as Bishop Wraith. So we shared a good number of meals and conversations with him. Now, back in 2001, he wrote a very academic article that ran about 60 pages on independent Catholicism and especially the role of ecclesia and episcopal. And since then, he presented at an interjurisdictional meeting of a number of different people from different groups in independent Catholicism, and he did a much shorter presentation covering the same material. And I've heavily drawn on him for this presentation because I think he put some things in sharp relief about the very beginning. We need to understand what was ecclesia, what was the church at the beginning, what was their understanding of church. And we also need to understand how the different roles that eventually evolved came into being. So Rafe's article, his more recent one, does it much more succinctly than before, but he makes this point. Church, we think of a place, a building, but ecclesia in the New Testament and in the early church leaders meant something quite different. It was an immediate and active gathering. It wasn't a place, it was a gathering. People called together by the gospel, who had been baptized, who were being sustained by the Eucharist. They were engaging together in discerning God's will, and they were in their own local setting. So it was an active thing, not a passive, here's a place and it sits there. No, they weren't just sitting there. They were very active. And so what Rafe makes the point in his presentation done in 2019, that before what we call ecclesiology became very convoluted, contradictory, and sectarian, there was something of an early consensus about church and how it should run. And so the best we can say is that independent Catholicism is not just a protest against Rome. And old Catholicism was never just about a protest against Rome. At its best, it's a claim about how Catholic life is rooted in the local community. And so he says that it was not ecclesiology that was just in a Roman jurisdiction or an administrative unit, but it was the local community gathering around a bishop, its presbytery, its deacons, and its people. And he relates that to two ancient guides. And in the last couple of days, I've been going back and reading some research about both Ignatius and Cyprian, who are our ancient guides. And they don't sit down and write a book and say, you should organize your church this way. We don't have those kind of leadership guides in the ancient times, but you can derive information out of them. And you will recognize some of these principles because they are part of what we think of ourselves as independent Catholicism. Cyprian helps us understand how episcopal leadership was received through the participation of the people, the presbyters, and neighboring bishops. The term autocephalic has been thrown around, that they were autocephalic. Actually, that term develops later. It's not at this stage. And there's a lot of conflict still, even today, about what that means, particularly in the Orthodox. There's big fights going on about what is meant by autocephalic, and they've carried it from the beginning to now. So what we do gather from Cyprian in particular is that the Christian community gathered around one another, and in Antioch, where he was based, it was a multi-ethnic, multi-language community. Hello? Sound familiar?
Interesting.
Looks familiar.
And his way of explaining Christian identity is that it emerges in a community learning how to hold differences together without losing the gospel. It's a community that can tolerate differences and hold them together.
Now, did they reach out to other communities as well? Did they also reach out to other communities and other churches?
Yes, and that's the next point.
Because when you also say independent churches, sometimes I get the feeling that it's like a cult, that they don't want to reach out beyond that. They just want to
Many of
be,
them today don't talk to each other. They don't relate to other groups. But in the Cyprian context, the bishop was working in concert with his own presbyters and deacons and people. And the way Cyprian writes it, you don't get a sense of that kind of pecking order that we're thinking about. They all cooperated with their bishop, and they were all important. And today I was reading a book that I haven't gotten too far into yet. The author is at Mount St. Mary, and he asserts that in this era, there was no such thing as laity.
Everybody was
No such thing as laity.
interesting.
Everybody,
The whole community was involved in the
a
service.
role. So to think about that one, we've got to reprocess some things
That's
to
interesting.
think about that. So we learn to be in a community and hold difference together. Don't lose the gospel. And for Cyprian, it was a holy communication, conversation involving the presbytery and the wider ecclesia, and it was not a private power possessed by one office holder. It simply wasn't. The deacons were very important. If you read in his 7 letters, I'm that tenacious with 7 letters, but the deacons were very prominent, and so were the presbytery, and so were the others, even though I can see the concept that there really wasn't what we call a laity today, a laity who sits back and watches the show. I don't think that happened in these times. Everybody was involved, and it was not a private power. It was someone responsible for noticing, guarding, and caring. And Rafe Adams connects it to First Peter's description of the shepherd and overseer of your souls. One who looked after the sick and imprisoned. So there was this deep interrelatedness of bishop, presbyters, deacons, and people in the life of the church. Power, we should look at the words for power and authority in the Greek. In the Greek, power is dynamis, and authority is exousia, meaning authority or delegated permission. And so Rafe reads this ecclesial authority as not domination, not coercion, not unrestricted control. The authority is a commission given for a particular task. And that task is to safeguard the community.
Nice.
Doesn't mean that they didn't have a committee for the building, or a committee for missions and all that stuff we do today. We're talking a much more primitive organization, but this was the level at which the foundation for how church relates was built. So Catholic in this terminology is not a person like I'm a Catholic, and Catholic means what is whole, complete, full, or universal. So a local tract church is Catholic when it has and does what is necessary to be fully church. And what is it to be fully church? The people gather, they share the Eucharist. There's a bishop with pastoral oversight who helps people with their spiritual journeys, who discerns. And the bishop is said to be one who lives in communion with other churches, even though it may be a local organization. The early documents seem to indicate that there were dots and clusters of churches, and that the bishops and presbytery got together and they talked with each other. Each was whole in itself, but called into communion with others. So communion with other communities is not the same thing as being absorbed by them. You can be independent, local, unique to your area, and in communion with somebody else without being absorbed by them.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of the early church foundation that Rafe Adams gave in his two publications that I have read. And I think that it will serve as a lens for the chapters that follow, because you need to understand ecclesiology, which is the subspecialty of church, what makes a church. You need to understand intercommunion. You need to understand local, relational, the issues of accountable leadership will come up, whatever they're called. So we're getting a picture of what they considered crucial. They did not have to all do things the same way, and they did not have to blend and be homogenized into one. They could be separate and in communion with one another. And within a locale, you could have whole diversity. And what we learned from Cyprian is that the church, the local church, needs to hold these tensions, these diversities, these differences together in sharing the gospel. So that's part of why I think it's so important that we talk about the other ethnic groups, the other national groups, because we have them all in our own community. And how much do we really understand about what it means to our East Indians, or to our Filipinos, or to our Hispanics, who are very numerous among us? How is it different from us plain old Caucasians, for goodness sake? It's almost a dirty word. I joke, I jest. So this is what the course is going to focus on. We're first going to go through in pretty fine detail what happened in Rome, what led to the Old Catholic movement, what were the underlying theological issues, because it wasn't nearly as simple as we've been led to believe. It wasn't just a strike against the Pope. There was a lot of underlying theology and approach to theology and approach to ecclesiology that was at stake. And the various European entities who had their own schools, and their own governments, which in quite a few cases overlap with church governing. You got to realize they weren't completely separate at that stage. And that enters into the puzzle too. So we will try to cover how old Catholicism grew out, and then we'll look at several other strands that became independent, completely independent of European Old Catholicism. It didn't have anything to do with European Old Catholicism. In South America, in Brazil, it didn't have anything to do with them. Eventually, the Filipinos hooked up with the old Catholics, but it didn't start out that way at all. And then the Polish is another strong group that developed their own church that's lasted for 100 years. It had nothing to do with what went on in Europe, though they eventually too made a connection with Utrecht, and now they're trying to get out of it. I think they want to go back to Rome. That seems to be the movement of the Polish American Independent Church. It's making a move back toward Rome, but not all of them. Some of them have stayed independent, and that's another story we'll get to. So any thoughts about this? I've been talking all this time. Tell me what you think. What do you want to know? What are your own thoughts about all of this?
I'm really excited to hear international perspectives because we really haven't. I've never heard much about it at all. I've heard about some of the different European groups aside from Old Catholic, like the Polish, but not anything about Brazil. I didn't even know there was a Brazilian. So it'd be interesting to
5 million.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah. So that
we've got stories in our own church of people, how they went from Rome to independent Catholicism, to living here, or some of the people I'm talking to came and got educated here and went back to their home countries.
Yeah.
I've got some really exciting interviews coming up on that.
I have a lot of thoughts.
What?
Well, first of all, which one is Rafe? What state is he from?
ECC.
Who?
Rafe.
He is a retired bishop from the ECC.
I know. Do you know what state he's? Because I have memories of stuff that was going on, but what state?
He's somewhere in the Midwest.
Okay, so I know.
I'm sure.
I know who Rafe is. Who
Yeah,
Bishop Rafe
he
is.
came to.
And he broke off from the ECC.
No,
Didn't he?
I think he just
Okay, I've got a
retired.
different person in mind.
He retired.
Well,
There was a couple
retired,
of them that
but
didn't.
there was a group after Rafe that broke away.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting to is that there seems to be a common issue, and that is a desire to stay local. That seems to be a theme that's repeated with a lot of these independents.
Yeah. And that's important. If you go back to the biblical model, it was local. And the guy I started reading today said the local is what's valid in the early model.
Mm-hmm.
These building of empires was a Roman idea. It was not a Christian idea.
Right.
There's
And then another thought I was having is that this goes back 100 years, but there's a whole history of Christians before the Roman Catholics. So I'm wondering any parallels of those early Christians like the Gnostics, and I'm wondering if there were some similarities, and we seem to identify with the old Catholics, But I'm wondering if there's some of these groups that go,
Yeah.
You can
relating before to those
You
earlier.
could go all the way back because at the time of Cyprian, they were trying to fight off the Docetism. They were trying to fight off. They were still fighting off Jewish connections, and you can see it all the way through the history of the church. But for this class, what I decided to do, they have a separate course on Roman Catholicism, which takes them up through all of the developments and the secessions and breakaways through that whole history. And I decided not to try to repeat that. That's biting off more than you can do in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So they have a separate
Great study.
course for that. Well, we have that course. That's one that they do as an independent study because we have the course on videotape for them to do. But this one I thought was important to do live and to build from scratch because it hasn't been built from scratch. Jump in.
When you study and try to define independent Catholicism, we only have right now with Rafe US-based study, mostly on. I read through your documents with Reverend Matthias.
Yes.
I went through all those. So I see there's 5 million in Brazil. There's 12 million independent Catholics in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I don't know how many in Europe, but it's strongly influenced by the Netherlands. And then these national organizations that are coming out calling themselves National Catholics, Polish National, and then that when we build, there's 1 million of us here in the U.S.
Yes.
And 1 million because you join liberal Catholics and old Catholics. If you only say old Catholics, there's only 30,000 of them. So I said, there's 1.3 million Catholics in the Roman Catholic Diocese of Orange.
Yeah.
We're only 200 in St. Matthew. So what about the others?
Yeah.
But I strongly believe that when we pick up all these scholarly presentation, especially Reverend Matthias from Texas, we will learn something, but at the same time, we ourselves as a shepherd, we can contribute something in defining the identity.
We're going to contribute to that
US.
teaching.
Yes.
And I'm not arrogant when I say that because you know full well I didn't ask for this job.
Yes. But somebody's leading you. Now that you're at it.
And I had it in my head that I wasn't qualified.
Oh, shit.
Because I've been told I wasn't qualified.
The PhD is
So you told PhD in what? Higher and deeper?
psychology.
In psychology. No, but I do have years of studying on my own. I know how to research.
Yes.
I know how to learn. So
But,
I'm going to give it my best.
the
And
basic,
what I'm doing too, the manuscript is going to be reviewed by people in different locations who are being asked to add commentary. It won't just be me. Bishop Tomas in Poland
is
Yes.
contributing.
is going to give me an interview and is going to help me with the chapter on the Polish strand.
You were gonna interview him.
Yes, absolutely. So it won't just be me. It'll have
That's the best way to do it.
a bunch of voices of some of whom are very scholarly, so it'll get put together. It'll take a while. And you'll get it in process.
You might want to check progressive Roman Catholic sources that are open to give their thoughts regarding who we are in the Roman
If you
Catholic.
can give me clues as to where to go, darling, I will be happy to do.
I'll introduce you to a bishop who was a dean of studying the theological.
Oh, if you can hook me up, I'm game. Please go with me.
Yes. He invited us in our delegation in 2016, but the Filipinos preferred a wedding than a theological school. So I left them, I went to the theological school, and they went to the wedding party. So I said, that's an opportunity lost, but we still have contact.
Okay, that's good.
He's now a bishop. For the
Well,
moment.
you'll get it in process. You'll get the pieces as I have them. It'll probably be finished after this course is done, but you'll get it as it's in its fluid state, shall we say,
Yes.
that in its right. I have actually written all of the chapters. I didn't sit on my bum this summer
While you were in Belgium?
while I was in Belgium. Ask her.
She never rests.
She does.
She never rests.
I don't know a time when you sit on your bum.
A lot, my love,
You don't. You're always working.
but it's always going.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll get it in process.
I like the basis that you established here regarding ecclesiology and history.
What?
I like the basis when you refer to ecclesiology and history,
Yes.
because they form a basic thinking of discussion so that you know where you're coming from. Because if you don't know that, well,
And you're going to learn that that was really the underlying fight with the Pope at the time
it still is.
that he declared himself infallible.
Right.
It still is.
It was, the underlying fight was, what is the source of our understanding of ecclesiology? Are we going to rely just on Thomas Aquinas over here,
Yeah.
who's going to give us a nice abstract, symbolic putting together of what the church should be? Or are we going to look at what actually happened?
Saint
And
Augustine.
more to come, my dears.
How about Saint Augustine?
I would like to stop with a responsive meditation and prayer. And I need 4 leaders. And I think that we have them right here. Gary, leader 1, Wendy, leader 2, Meredith, leader 3, and Sharon, leader 4. And the rest of us are the people.
Responsive meditation and prayer. Christ called the church into being as a people gathered in his name. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, he is present among them. In the Eucharist, the scattered became the body of Christ.
Gather us in Christ.
Make us one body.
All in all, holy.
Teach us to receive authority as service. You sent your disciples to proclaim the reign of God and to heal, not to rule over others. Form our leaders in the patience and mercy of Christ.
Yes,
Use the power. Lift up and empower shepherds who notice the lost, listen for the Spirit, and serve the communion of your people.
Lord of the local church and of the whole church, renew in us the Catholicity that makes your people whole. As Antioch learned to hold difference in the gospel and still share at the table, teach us to receive one another in peace.
Make
Us
us
Catholic in the ancient sense, gathered, whole, and alive in communion. Tune our many voices to one song.
Spirit of wisdom, guide the church in binding and loosing. When hard questions arise, draw us away from the need of certainty and finality. Guide us into patience with faithful discernment and the ability to tolerate differences.
Remind
Remind
us
us that you, Lord, are present where people gather in your name, and your peace surpasses all human understanding.
Speak through the whole body. Teach us to honor each member and to care for one another in Christ.
you take that.
Lord Jesus Christ, shepherd and overseer of our souls, gather us at your table, send us out to share your love. Make this community a faithful sign of your body. Make our Eucharist become mission, our authority become care, our Catholicity become wholeness, and our communion become love. Amen.
Amen.
So, Bishop, would you give us a blessing?
The Lord is with you.
And also with you.
With you.
May Sophia, the Spirit, accompany us in our journey as we go back to each of our undertakings. May she continue to inspire us with our discipleship, and may the Good Shepherd always gather us into one. In the name of the Father, the Son,
In
and
the
the Holy
Father.
Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
You got me all excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
How many
12
sessions do you think we're gonna do? 12. 12, it doesn't.
12, yeah.
That's right. That's deep.
You can Zoom with the bishop.
What?
You can Zoom with the bishop,
I can.
the Roman Catholic bishop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, swing
Hey.
calls.
I'm going this Saturday.
Yeti, you crack me up.